Welcome back to another Ret Paladin video. Verabin here. Today we are going to be looking at the single target rotation for Ret Paladins. This is a question that I get a lot in the comments and on Twitch and places like that as far as what is the best rotation to use, especially for new Paladins. So even if you're an existing Paladin and you've been playing for a while, hopefully you'll be able to get something from this video. This is primarily focused on PvE, but knowing the rotation really well and kind of getting that muscle memory down is also going to be really critical to doing really good damage in PvP as well. So stick around. We're going to be looking at talents, rotations, all that good stuff. Alright guys, so the first thing we're going to look at is talent. So the talent build that I'm showing on screen right now is the one that sims the best for me personally. Obviously, if you are really concerned about just squeezing out that extra 1% or 2% damage, then you probably need to go ahead and sim yourself. But I'm going to tell you why I think this is the best one, regardless of what the sim says, because I believe the sims can kind of skew towards just like a patchwork style kind of situation. And you guys, you Raiders, Mythic Plus guys know out there, it's never like that, right? It's never a patchwork fight. There's always movement, there's always mechanics and things like that. And I believe that using this talent build, in addition to using the Final Verdict Legendary, which recently got a 15% buff, it's an amazing ability, does so much damage, and I believe that it's just a perfect legendary for us to be using in single target. So right now, this is the talent build that I'm using. This is Righteous Verdict. Obviously, this is going to increase your damage by 15%, an additional 15% on top of what the Final Verdict does. So that's going to give you a nice boost there. The uptime on this is probably going to be near 100%. It's going to be really high uptime. It's way easier to use than Execution Sentence, and that's the main reason why I don't like Execution Sentence. When I send my character, Execution Sentence does do a little bit more damage, but it's such a minor amount. It's like 40 more damage. It's like 5,500 damage to 5,540. It's nothing. So I believe that the ease of this passive, the way that it works, and the fact that it's up 100% of the time, no-brainer. Blade of Wrath, no-brainer as well. More Blades of Wrath mean more Holy Power, which means more Final Verdicts, which means more damage. Easy stuff. Seraphim is another one as well that I believe works really well with your Righteous Verdict and your using the Final Verdict Legendary. It times pretty well with your Kyrian Divine Tool if you are running Kyrian, and then it's going to be up for every time you want to use Final Reckoning. So when you go to sim yourself, some of these are going to be like, there's going to be options where like one might be a little bit more, a little bit less, but I think that Seraphim is really easy to use. I macro it with my Avenging Wrath and my On Use Trinket, easy stuff. So you don't really have to think about it. You just have to make sure you have 3 Holy Power whenever you're ready to go, whenever your wings are up, or or every 1 minute when you have your divine tool and your Final Reckoning up. So anyway, we're going to talk about rotation a little bit more. I just wanted to go through the talent build. This is my recommended single target talent build, especially for Kyrian. It could change a little bit if you're Venthyr, but I think most Paladins out there are actually running Kyrian, no matter what the sims say, because Kyrian, I believe, is the better overall covenant if you're interested in doing Mythic Plus and PvP or anything like that. Even doing those casually, I think the Venthyr doesn't bring nearly as much to the table, and I think that's especially true now that Final Verdict is on the radar, and it's one that I think is the best talent or best legendary to use. So that's kind of the talents, and we kind of looped in the covenants as well. So let's take a look at the rotation. All right, so I want to go over some basics really quickly before we get started. Obviously, Holy Power is the most important resource that we have. You cannot overcap Holy Power. If you are overcapping Holy Power, you really need to look at your rotation and try to do something a little bit different. Try to weave in a Templar's Verdict, Final Verdict a little bit sooner, something like that, but never cap Holy Power. That's the biggest thing. The next thing that's really important is managing your Judgment debuff. Now, if you're not aware, when you judge a target, your next Final Verdict is going to do an additional 25% damage. So obviously, that's a really strong debuff. Now, keep in mind, that debuff is also applied by the Ringing Clarity judgments as well. So that's going to be an important thing to consider. So what that means is that you wouldn't want to judge as your last ability before you cast Divine Toll, because that's going to waste that Judgment debuff. So you want to make sure the last thing you hit is like a Crusader Strike, and then you can do Divine Toll, and then you can do a final verdict into that, and then judge and do another beefed up final verdict. So that's going to be really, really important. The other thing with this build, as we mentioned before, is that keeping righteous verdict up is really, really important. It shouldn't really be a problem, but it's one of those things you kind of have to keep an eye on. Righteous verdict only lasts about 6 seconds, so that's something that you want to pay attention to for sure. So beyond that, you're basically just trying to generate as much holy power as you can and making sure that you save your Seraphim and to line Seraphim up with your Final Reckoning and your Divine Toll. You can see in the clip that's running in the background. We're going to try to also pick up those Pelagos little buff bubbles that pop onto the ground, because we want to keep that mastery buff up as long as we can. So if you pick up all the little bubbles, you should be able to have it up for maybe about a third of the time. So it's actually a pretty strong debuff that stays up for quite a while. After that, you're basically going to be casting your Blade of Justice to generate 2 holy power, casting your Crusader Strike to get 1 holy power, and then casting Judgment, as we mentioned before, to get a holy power as well. You're going to get some Hammer of Wrath procs from your final verdict. Not a whole lot, but you'll get a few of those. And for those are going to be more important than Crusader Strike, but they're not as important as Blade of Justice, because they do a lot more damage than Crusader Strike. They generate 1 holy power, but because they only generate 1 holy power, you're not going to want to use them ahead of Blade of Justice. So there's a few other kind of small things to keep in mind when you're doing this rotation. So every once in a while you'll see me casting a Consecration in there. You don't really need to cast Consecration. It does about 100 damage per second, so it's not a terrible thing to cast, but the problem is you never want it to clip another ability. And sometimes you can see on my weak aura sometimes that it'll show like, hey, here's the next ability that's coming up. That's the one you should be ready to hit. And sometimes I'll cast Consecration, and then I'll realize, Crusader Strike was like a second from being there, so I'm going to clip it in the GCD, and that's not something that you want to do. That's just a mistake. And speaking of weak auras, I highly, highly recommend that you get a weak aura, kind of like the one that I have, so you don't have to look down at your bars. You have everything right there. And I'll put a link in the description for this particular one that I use. I've been using it for a few months, and I'm extremely happy with it. So it is definitely one. It tracks all your cooldowns. It tracks your, even your short-term cooldown things like Crusader Strike and stuff like that. It tracks your bubble, all that good stuff. So highly, highly recommend that you get something like that. Another question that I get asked sometimes in the comments, and this is a good question actually, is why do you wait till you get 5 holy power before you use your final verdict? And I think that's a really, really good question. So the answer to that question is that normally speaking, when you have 3 holy power, normally you have another button to press that will generate another holy power. Not always, but in my opinion, if you're in that situation where you've got 3 holy power, you can cast final verdict, but you could also cast, and none of your other abilities are available, then you should cast Consecration instead, because that's going to give you 100 DPS, and you're basically just wasting that GCD so that another ability can come available, because Consecration isn't really that much damage. But if you have enough haste, if you have in the range of like 12, 15, 16% haste, you really shouldn't have this problem in your rotation. Every once in a while, maybe once every 5 minutes or so, you'll have a dead spot in your rotation, but put a Consecration in there. Don't try to waste those 3 holy power. And also keep in mind that if the Judgment debuff isn't there, then that 3 holy power kind of gets wasted. So especially like if Judgment is about to come up in another second or so and you've got 3 holy power, then you should just wait for Judgment to come up and then cast Judgment and then cast your Templar's Verdict, because then it'll do additional damage. So that's really it for the video, guys. If you have any other questions, let me know in the comments. Please be sure to hodge that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care. Yeah.